everybody, welcome back to the Pylon Show. I am Artosis, joined by two wonderful guests today. TLO, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you for having me, Dan, and I'm really excited today.
Yeah, this is going to be a great episode. Of course, you all know TLO. He's been on like 10 episodes or something at this point. It's crazy. And then a brand new guest that I am so excited to talk to, Tobi Lutke. Is that how I say your name?
Perfect.
Oh, look at me. Damn, I'm good. The
He's
CEO
a little bit generous there.
Yes, well, I guess you both are German, so you can pronounce that much better than I. But welcome to the show. You are the CEO of Shopify. Am I correct?
That's right. Not
and
Spotify.
A bit of a StarCraft fan.
Shopify. Yes.
Yes, Shopify.
Very much
not
so.
Spotify. Did I say Spotify?
No. You got it right.
Okay.
Yeah. Everyone knows Spotify.
I'm like, this is Tobi Lutke, and he is the CEO of Spotify, the music service. Okay. We are going to dive into some great conversations in just a moment. First, though, let me quickly mention our sponsors. Check out matcherino.com/The Pylon Show. This is a big part of the show, and you can contribute for free. You just log in, hit that contribute button, and type in corn chip, because apparently it's like National Corn Chip Day or something like that. So go ahead and do that. We also have some new merchandise there if you want to check it out. Mug and hoodie and all that kind of stuff that you normally get on Matcherino. And of course, we have some other promotions going on there with G Fuel, which is an energy drink. If you're into that type of thing, please check that out. Give them some follows and all that. And of course, we have our Patreon, which is patreon.com/The Pylon Show. If you'd like to ask questions of today's guests or any guests, get early access to VODs and all that, check it out on patreon.com/The Pylon Show. And if you do that and want to drop a question or anything like that, check up on anything going on with The Pylon Show. Check out thepylonshow.com, where we have all of your Pylon Show needs, all of the show notes, all of the episodes, all the podcast links, all of basically everything is there, thepylonshow.com. Okay, that does it for that. I would love to start off of just kind of getting a little bit deeper introduction of you, Tobi. Like, what is Shopify exactly, so people understand?
Yeah. So Shopify is so maybe just very quickly. I going a little bit back in time. In around 2004, I just recently arrived in Canada, and I was looking to start my own business, and what I ended up deciding on was that I would start an online snowboarding business, basically selling snowboards and bindings and these kind of things, which really was because I spent a lot of time researching snowboards because I needed some because it's cold in Canada, and that's basically what I did for half a year.
That's how people get around here.
Yeah, it's basically public transportation, you realize, and so I was like deep into that thing, and then my background is I'm a programmer. I apprenticed as a programmer while living in Germany, and I tried to figure out a way to like put those things together. So I ended up deciding that an online business would be good, and I built this, and over the next year, it actually worked quite well. It's called Snow Devil. It succeeded in some mild way, but more interestingly, what I figured out is that it was absolutely no one has thought about how to make it easier to start internet businesses. I tried to use a bunch of software. I tried to use a bunch of open source things. It just was very, very, very hard to do. So I ended up having to build my own software to support a business. And as the selling started, as people sort of recognized Snow Devil, I increasingly got these inquiries of people wanting to potentially license the software I was using because it was sort of recognizably different. And that was really the beginning of Shopify, and that's really what it does. It's basically at this point, it's the software that I wished I would have found in 2004 when I was starting my own business. And so, there's a lot to the story. Now it is a global company. It's a public company that's traded in Canada and the New York Stock Exchange. It's has about 5,000 people who work here,
Wow.
and with 1 million merchants who sold like combined over $100 billion worth of products over the course of time. And the best thing about it is it's really empowering entrepreneurs, which I think is a really important thing. And so it's a good story of discovering something that was needed and then building it, and then it was the market and the world sort of found it to be something of value.
Well, a great introduction of your company and kind of how it got started. But I'm sure that's leaving a lot of people wondering why you are on the Pylon show, which is just a show where we talk about StarCraft. So could you give some of your gaming background for us?
So I should begin by saying I'm pretty sure I'm the lowest ranked StarCraft player who ever was on your show. So
I promise you it's not true.
Okay. So I child of the 90s and 80s and 90s, I played the first Internet games as they came out. I was playing a lot of Quake World and Quake 3 and so on. And then StarCraft when it came out. I just totally loved the game. Then Brood War came out, and in those times we went to a lot of LAN parties because internet in Germany was just a disaster. It was all dial-ups or ISDN at best, which means you start north of 60, 70 ping. And so what we ended up doing is we got together like thousands of people in places like every weekend. I know this still goes on, but not quite as regularly as it did back in those days. And I increasingly found myself to be I was there for the Quake tournaments because those I could do well in, and win enough money at least to pay gas to go to the next one.
Yeah.
But then would try to figure out how to get into the StarCraft tournaments, and so that was really where sort of my interest increasingly went. Then fast forward, a decade from there, and me and my co-founders at Shopify, we've always played a lot of video games. We played, whatever was around, FIFA or fighting games. And then StarCraft 2 came out, and sort of reignited my love for the game. I played it up to I played in Diamond League, then that was a top league, so there was some interest, but increasingly just because Shopify was really the center of my attention, and in the evenings I was so beat that StarCraft takes a lot out of you, so I just watched both of you play and commentate the GSL, and so in a way like StarCraft was sort of part of a journey, and yes. So it's a very important game to me. I feel I credit it with a lot of good, how should I say this? Building companies is a journey, and that journey is successful or unsuccessful, largely due to luck. But in certain situations, the thing that makes a difference is making good choices. And so your skill of making good choices ends up being a very, very important input into the potential of a company. And like I find myself in many cases drawing back on the kind of skills that you would use doing a StarCraft match. And so I credit it with helping me sort of learning how to learn, how to make choices that are long-term beneficial. And I'm sure we can get into some of those things. But so I'm a jersey-wearing fan of the StarCraft community, of the StarCraft game, and the genre, but not as other than that, I have no credentials to be here.
Well, I think it's fair to say your macro skills have transferred a little bit.
It is funny. There have been observations recently, because one thing which I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but
please.
My Twitter following and like the Venn diagram between the Twitter followings of the three of us is probably not that big. Like there's a lot more asset managers and Wall Street investment bankers following me than might otherwise be following you, Dan. And so
yes.
so with this recent, ever since the Home Story Cup revelations, that I'm into the game, and now since I've done some other things, people have been trying to sort of figure out, okay, like, what does that mean? What can we learn from this? And there's been some really, really funny observations about the similarities of Shopify strategy to various Zerg build orders. And
well,
humans are very good at pattern matching where there aren't any. But
no, I was going to say, not to criticize your gameplay too much, but I hope people are not necessarily structuring their company after your play just yet. So that's some problems.
Maybe I'm trying to misdirect.
That's a meta strategy.
This is like 200 IQ game here.
Wow. Well, that's I mean, you gave me a lot to work with there. I think the best place to start off might be like where the idea for you to come on the show came from, which was Select, a very famous old Terran pro gamer, for people who don't quite remember him from Wings of Liberty, even right at the beginning. Very, very talented player. I was tweeting about wanting to find an internship for the upcoming summer, like the 2020 summer. And you actually tweeted back at him and mentioned that his StarCraft accomplishments are enough of a CV to be able to do this. And I read that and I'm like, CV, like I've heard this before, but what is it? So I looked it up and I'll let people know. It is CV, circum vitae. I don't know if I said that right, but it is an abbreviation. If a job advertisement asks for a CV, that's a hint that the employer expects a great deal of life experience and accomplishments, including education, origin research, presentations you've given, and papers or books you've published.
Jeez.
So that sounded to me like you actually put a lot of stock into what Select has done as a pro gamer.
I just use it as a throwaway term for instead of resume. If it implies anything else, then I was unaware of that until this point.
I'm reading too deeply into it then, because like I think that means like resume, but then I looked it up. I was like, whoa.
Well, I think then that tells a lot to the people, that neither of us ever had a job that wasn't anything but StarCraft.
Pretty much.
Well, I've never been hired either, so like it's. I guess like I've successfully I'm the only person at Shopify who's never been actually hired by the company, so.
Oh wow, you snuck your way right in there.
Like I just smartly kind of hired below me the entire time. And yeah, so but back to the like here's why this makes sense in my mind. So what Shopify again, I'm only going to talk about Shopify in as much as it is really relevant to what we're talking about. But like it's unfortunately the only journey I've been on, so it's like it's the only place I can draw from. So we built Shopify not in Silicon Valley, where most technology companies are being built. We actually, like, it's a great place. We have an office there, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's like Canada and Ottawa specifically, where we started, are just very different places. We can't find ready-made people who have done it before for everything that you might need in a technology company, because people have not built the kind of companies that we did there. And so Shopify, part of the reason why it worked is because we never really hired people for what they've already done in life. We've sort of developed a way of hiring people and a way to talking to people and interviewing people. That's what it attempts to do is it tries to figure out what people's future potential is. And then after they decide to join up with us, it behooves us to help them reach this potential much sooner. So there's a very strong belief in this idea of personal growth. And so the things that we are looking for in these interviews, this is called life storying someone. We're going through the life story, and the situations that we precisely, and I probably shouldn't give too much of this away, but what we are trying to home in on are moments in people's history where they could have made several choices. And the choice they ended up making, and we sometimes go into fairly minute details on this, is what role did they play themselves in this situation? Did they take personal ownership? Did they do what was right instead of what was easy? Did they potentially dismiss other people's sort of orthodox advice because they just knew something better? Did they work hard? These kind of ideas. And so those are the things we look for, and then based on this, I think we can make a judgment on their future potential and if they would thrive or do well in the Shopify culture. Just applying this lens to someone who became a StarCraft pro player checks every single box already. Like I don't need to life story it. First of all, I know a good part of a life story, just from watching GSL, and second, StarCraft is a one-on-one sport. It's not an organized sport. The only people who can ever become pro players are people who are incredibly self-motivated. Often, and you both will know this much better than I do, because for me this is an outside observation, probably always going against the advice of any orthodoxy, potentially against the advice of parents and friends, going all in on something which is a incredibly difficult thing to do with incredibly uncertain future, but basically fueled by a passion of just self-improvement, right? Like we all know how to click that watch replay button after the game. We understand, like from StarCraft, you just understand that, investing in today, practicing things means you're going to be better tomorrow, which is not nearly as often, like it's not nearly as common as we might think in the world. So to me, like there's so many things that are already de-risked for someone like Select, that I felt that I'm very happy to jump over like 5 steps in the interview process in this particular case.
No, that's excellent. I love the way that you actually worded it. I didn't really think of it like that, but something that you mentioned a little bit earlier when you were talking about it was about how StarCraft like teaches you how to learn, which is, I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that, because that's actually something that I say from time to time, where I'm like, basically, if you can be a high level StarCraft player, I feel like you'll be successful in life. That's it, because the game is so hard, and if you don't know how to learn, you can't do it. It just you won't ever get to the top.
My feeling on that is, as Tobi is saying, it teaches you that, and most people know that, but StarCraft puts such an honest mirror in front of you to have to reflect on that. And then there's very direct feedback on what's going on, how your win rates are developing, what kind of build orders you're losing against. So I think that's what StarCraft is so beautiful at, that it is so honest. A lot of things in life, you don't have a lot of information if you're getting better at something. It's kind of vague. And StarCraft just has enough complexity for it not to be super obvious and too simple, but just enough that I think it reflects on you and you can understand how to get better. Pretty straightforward.
Yeah, like we have actually a lot of examples within StarCraft, I feel like, of players that like they got good and then they went and did something else and were like ultra successful. Like, some of the first ones that popped to mind, like Elke, for instance, right? He's one of the best poker players in the world. The guy's like a millionaire now, and he was one of the very best non-Korean pros, right? He's actually the last person ever qualified for a StarCraft 1 tournament that wasn't Korean. So, and the thing is, the list actually goes on and on. We have like so many interesting. Poker's kind of like the big one that you can point to, but people have been very successful in all sorts of things. Like in the entertainment industry, there's several people from Korea that have entered into that very successfully. Obviously we have some other people, like for instance, Casually Explained, right? Like that guy was a good StarCraft player. Now he's like a giant YouTuber.
Absolutely. And the people that figure out how to excel in their niche as well, right? StarCraft teaches you that as well. You have players that are particularly good at one part of the game, and they just keep pushing for that more and more, and they somehow then become the best, at least for a period of time. And StarCraft teaching you that you can have your own style and do their own thing, I think is very similar to that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's kind of it's something that I'm actually kind of interested in here too, and we'll ask him about it a little bit when he gets back, right? You're offering a job to someone like Select. I wonder about people like you and I, Dario, who have skipped college altogether for StarCraft. Like, what is Take, what is going on here? Why is what?
Wait, what?
Is that literally Dennis right there? My God.
Wait,
This is the weirdest thing I've ever seen.
I have everything minimized right now.
I saw him sit down and I was like, that guy looks a lot like Take. That's really weird. And I was getting kind of distracted. And there he is. This is crazy. Guys, we didn't have any idea that Take was randomly going to be.
Wait, that's insane. What are you talking about?
Oh my God. Oh, I love it.
Oh, yeah, that's
okay.
That's assumed.
Well, for whatever reason, Take right now is in Ottawa, I guess, at Tobi's house or business or wherever he's filming this from. That is amazing.
That's crazy.
Sorry.
Well, I see that you have a visitor there. someone we know very well in StarCraft.
Me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess that maybe secret happenings are occurring, but Take over there, very cool to see. So we were talking a little bit about just like how StarCraft kind of like, if you're successful at it, you're successful at anything. And we talked a little bit about how we do have a lot of people who have, parlayed their StarCraft career and then just done something different and done well. And you said, like, for instance, becoming a pro gamer checks a bunch of these boxes. And then we were talking about, how like you have to know how to learn. What are some other skills that you see that StarCraft helps you develop?
I think, yeah, I mean, there's a list. I mean, I think the single one, most important one is that this entire idea of like investing into like being in better shape later, right? Like making decisions of, okay, do you get an upgrade, do you get another building, realizing that you will always compromise, right? And like you could be attacked the next moment, and being able to absorb and defend attack with a minimum amount of resources, while still investing to like win later. To me, this has relevance. At least I see it. It's a little bit hard to describe, but business really has a lot of these kind of situations, because it's always, everything is always about like resources are just very limited, right? Especially like if you go and you're like a tiny startup, are you in like every time you make if you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else, and no to actually the entire possibility space of all other things that you could be doing with the same amount of time. You're not trying to win. Like it's all a very, very, very long game. And so I think this is the kind of thing that as you're just playing like a StarCraft, like in the world of business, when you're building a company, you get into these kind of choices. Like, do I like, basically, am I expanding now or not? This is a kind of it's very common choice. Are you adding a new product? Are you going in a new market? You will, when you do this, you will reason about it and try to get all the best information and so on based on the situation. There's a lot about it, about business being a game of incomplete information as well, where acquiring information to make your choices is the kind of thing that you have to spend your time on, but you have to allocate resources and so on and so on. So you in a game of playing StarCraft, in an evening of playing StarCraft, you do this like 20, 30, 50 times, depending on how many games you do. In business, you do that 3-4 times when you build a company where you make these kind of key choices. So just practicing for that, I think, is really meaningful.
It's interesting because I think StarCraft does it even on a micro level where people don't realize, there are so many non-obvious solutions. Sometimes, let's say, if you have very few units, I want to use them as efficiently as possible. But sometimes if I have a lot more units than my opponent, efficiency doesn't matter, and I just need to throw my army at it. And then speed matters. And even companies need to make decisions like that, right? Like if you have very limited resources, you need to use them as good as you can. But sometimes the truth is, sometimes money is just a solution, and you just need to throw at it. And then you get the best result. And StarCraft does that. over and over again, and every situation is a little bit different.
In software development, this is something which comes up quite a lot. Like there's making modern, especially internet software, is very tricky because you never really know how the software will be developed over time. There's a lot of very tight feedback loops with customers who will tell you what kind of problems they have, and so what happens a lot with a lot of companies that I'm involved with and like that I've observed, or in some cases some I'm advise, is that a lot of the conversations that they have internally about we need to do this new thing, but we could do this as sort of a hack on top of the particular software that we have, or we could spend extra time refactor sort of the infrastructure and then end up like just building, like afterwards we can build this thing that people need very cleanly. So this is really like, am I going to invest in the long term, or am I going for the sort of rush now with what I've got? And making, like, you can do this as long as you so like both of those can be the right option, right? Like as long as you get enough benefit from just doing the hacky solution, then presumably your product might end up being purchased more, and you might have more customers, which then gives you more resources, which then means you can actually go back and solve these problems later. And it also might fail, at which point now you have hacky things built on top of hacky things, and eventually your entire software will crumble under the weight of all the hacks you accumulated, at which point like your entire product comes undone, and then you can never change it again.
All right, so what I'm taking away from that is if somebody is running a company and he's a cheesing player, I should invest early and then get out as soon as possible. But don't keep my stocks in that. That's good advice.
But I mean, like you do see it a lot. I mean, the way you see it a lot is it's a very common complaint against larger companies. Like even some companies which are somewhat relevant to the conversations about StarCraft that happen to be public companies, end up with they've built a lot of infrastructure, but then just kind of do very, very short-termy kind of things with that. They just don't really get the most out of this, which is the flip side.
And honestly, like cheesing is an actual like startup strategy. If we like 100%. Translate it to StarCraft, it's like a real thing where people know it's not going to be able to become a long-term thing. But if I just reach this point and sell it for a lot of money, like that can be a valid strategy for the person, right?
So lots of startups are built to flip.
Yeah.
And that's, I guess I've never thought about this, but yeah, like that might be the business equivalent of a cheese strategy. It's kind of funny to think of that.
When it seems to me, talking to you, I haven't actually watched you play StarCraft. I know that you've streamed it a couple times, but do you try to take a macro approach? Because it seems like that's kind of your mindset.
Yeah, I play. Yes.
Okay, just wanted to double check here.
I sort of
right now.
a move from my base, and then then I forget all about green injects, and then my game comes undone. But in theory, it's a macro strategy. If I ever refine it to the point where it should be.
So it sounds to me like you look at StarCraft as a place that helps you to practice many, many times, just kind of having the correct mindset for understanding trade-offs. Is that about right?
Yeah, and a bunch of other lessons as well. Like I think one of the most important realizations that most people make at some point in their lives is that time ends up becoming the most important resource that you have. This is something which I think is very natural to people who play StarCraft. It's not really about minerals or Vespene gas. It's about attention. And you have a limited amount of attention which you can spend. So again, I think there's just a lot of analogies there. Now, I don't know how unique those are. Like it just, for me, it's true that I learned about a lot of these kind of things, which I find exceptionally useful analogies and thought patterns. I learned many of those playing StarCraft. I'm sure there's lots of other ways. So I don't want to make StarCraft sound like too special, although I think.
Well, you're on the Pylon show. I mean,
that would be okay.
It's okay, yeah.
Especially around here. But it played a very important part in my life. Yeah.
I think a lot of games teach you a lot of different things, but I think there's few games that are as complete as StarCraft. You know, that brings so many different elements together.
And so if you go back to the society's opinions are such a trailing indicator of what's actually going on. It's usually like 10, 20, 30 years late to everything. But like right now, I can walk in any school and like talk to the parents and saying, hey, if tomorrow your kid would just pick up chess and obsessively play this for the next two years, like good thing, bad thing, the amount of thumbs up there is going to be overwhelming statistically. And again, this is not about chess. Chess is also an amazing game, but it's like I find it so like I think it's the right way to think for parents that it's good to play chess because you develop how to think. It's not you can analyze games. Like it's such a good game to learn, but as it comes to real life applicability, I mean, it's a game of perfect information. I don't know how relevant this is to anything in life, right? In fact, I asked like a chess grandmaster once, like, hey, what's you're doing really well now. How important was being a chess grandmaster to your career? And he said, what? No, not at all. Like, I just like chess. So I'm sure that's not true either. But like, I personally find the relevancy is way more obvious in StarCraft. It just happens to be categorized with video games, and therefore it's kind of put in the same bucket as everything else.
It's kind of funny, right? Because if chess would be released nowadays as a game, and it's the exact same game, same rules, it would never have the standing it has.
No.
Just because it happened to be released quite a while ago as a board game, suddenly it's like culturally accepted, right? But it shows you how there's, you know, the value of something like that isn't determined by the actual value that people get from it. It's just at some point arbitrarily decided by this society. And I feel like StarCraft has a potential where people would accept that. I feel we're not, you know, as big as some of the other games, but somehow, if I look at least a lot of other scenes, online scenes, but even some people outside of it, they respect it a lot. So I think we actually have some potential to grasp people and explain to them, no, StarCraft is actually a culturally important thing and people can improve through it. If, you know, any game has a chance to do that, I think it's StarCraft.
It would be my advice to the StarCraft community of really pushing the angle of how good this game is for children, because like universally parents like I think up until this point many parents managed to sort of keep all their fingers in the various holes in the dike against video games, but this is just not possible anymore. It's like it's too much of a factor in society. Like all the kids, my kids in schoolyards talk about whatever, like usually Fortnite or whatever. Like it's just or Minecraft. It's just like video games are going to be a shared common experience of the current generation to a much more complete degree than it was in our teens. And so which to me, what the lesson there for the parents is, well, okay, so select what games they play. You know, because it's not, video games are not interchangeable directly. Like it's not like, hey, you either video gaming or not. Like the game you play has a massive difference for what's going on in the brain while you're playing it.
The biggest market right now is mobile games, right? And there are so many completely brainless games that are just almost like addicting patterns where you just, you know, you click reward, and that's probably the games that most children are actually playing if you compare it to complicated games, PC games. And I think you make a really great point there of explaining people, you know, you can't stop games, but you can shift from this to actually something meaningful that teaches you and that, you know, makes you a better human being, hopefully.
Yeah, well, I would definitely agree with that. My daughter just recently in the past year started playing real video games, right? Like she played some kid like iPad, like make the bird fly around things a couple times, but she just started playing StarCraft and like some Legend of Zelda games, and just watching her start figuring out how to solve the puzzles in these various things and coming up with different ideas of what to do and thinking like, oh, I should like the other day we were playing some StarCraft 1 campaign, and she decided, like, she's like, I'm going to build bunkers at all these bridges. And I was like, that's a great idea. Wow. Because, that's like a natural choke point. And I don't know how she came up with this. I never told her, but I don't know. It was very heartwarming to see. It's very nice.
Like if you obviously don't do that, but like if it would be possible to just sort of like look into the brains of the kids doing various activities, very frowned upon, but like if that would be possible, I do think a lot of parents erroneously think that playing video games in general is the equivalent of watching television or like other passive.
Or even worse, like that's the thing. Like some parents would be okay with a child watching 2 hours of television, but they would be super frowning upon a kid playing 2 hours of video games.
Right. Yeah. And I think that really lacks precision, and I think people can think a little bit better about that.
Actually, something I listened to some of the podcasts that you've done, the Tim Ferriss show and the Knowledge Project and stuff. And you mentioned something, and it just kind of offhandedly that kind of reminded me of what we've been talking about, how StarCraft kind of teaches you other things. So I'd love to just ask you a question about that real quick, which was because this really kind of resonated with me in the way I've been looking at things more recently in the last couple of years with StarCraft. But you said you can learn more about how to build a good team from learning to play an instrument than any sort of managerial training. Could you just like speak to that for a moment?
Yeah, I was talking about I was learning to play like the recurring theme here is always learning, right? Like because I think this is really the thing we're talking about. Like StarCraft teaches you how to learn, and it also teaches you, and this is probably the best trick it sort of plays on the mind. There's a significant percentage of people who think about their potential, intelligence, skill sets as fixed, like given at birth and discovered throughout life, but not as the way we think about a muscle. Like a muscle is, obviously you're not going to be weak unless you use it a lot, and eventually it gets stronger with building it. I think I think one thing that the StarCraft does to you is you start like having a much more muscle-like appreciation of skill and talent and practicing. So I found myself whenever I have a thought where I realize that I have a fixed mindset instead of a growth mindset, that then I'm sort of challenging myself to fix that. So at some point I had this thought that it would have been so great if I would have talent for playing like the guitar, and but sadly I didn't. And then I stopped myself and said, okay, well, hold on, I just didn't put the work in. Should I put the work in? Like, and so I made the decision to learn it. So I learned it. Ended up being really, really fun. Loved it. Eventually got to the point where sort of like I couldn't play in a jazz band, but like I sort of learned, like jazz was this completely inaccessible form of music to me. It just people put it on, but I sort of didn't get it. And only after learning the instrument, I kind of realized how it works, because I mean, there's a lot of jazz, but like the form that I got really inspired by is that there's scales, there's harmonies, there's things that go well with each other, and a jazz band, what it does is it designates an individual as the leader, and that person sets the basic ideas, sets the scale, figures out which direction to go, and it's the rest of the music emerges from the combined skill of all the individuals just going with this. Like there's no there's no note sheets. There's just this sort of, I'm a saxophone player, and I'm gonna put myself into your journey. I'm supporting you to make it better. And I find that, like, I wish someone would have told me that. Like, this is just such an amazing metaphor of what real leadership, or actually not actually leadership. Leadership is actually incidental to this. How to really accomplish things that are otherwise unattainable. because we tend to think about teams in a very militaristic way. There's like the general making decisions, which then gives to it sort of goes down a chain until it hits the nodes of people simply executing orders. This is actually World War I, II style military. Even World War II, this is not really true anymore. Modern military is nothing like this. But this is sort of our conception. And there are just much better metaphors for how really, really great things actually are emergent and how they allow people enough white space to not just follow someone else's doctrine, but rather put a bit of them, or all of their life skills back into something. I just thought this was was beautiful, and I found this to be very instructive when working with people from all sorts of different backgrounds.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because the hierarchy works really well in an ideal scenario, but once a problem occurs and the person at the very bottom is not allowed to make a decision but just executes, even though they might know this is wrong, this is going to cause problems, then disaster happens. And we see that happen in so many tragedies of human life where that space wasn't given, but a simple call to somebody that they aren't allowed to call would have prevented all of that happening. But because they were in this small bubble at the bottom, they couldn't do anything about it.
And so a lot of the traditional business thinking comes from basically these perfect information environments, like Henry Ford's factories, right? You know exactly what to put in one side of a factory, and when everyone had one task which they had to do, and there was a conveyor belt, and everyone your job was take these two widgets and make one new widget out of it and put it back on the thing, right? So a lot of managerial thinking dates back to a guy called Richard Taylor in the sort of late 1800s, who was the first person to run around with a stopwatch and try to decompose. It's probably not the first one, but sort of history has it that he sort of invented this for the during the Industrial Revolution, and break down these larger tasks into these small tasks, and all the efficiency of Industrial Revolution and modernity accrued to society because of this innovation. This to me resembles, yes, this is how you can build a car. This is how you can solve a lot of complicated problems. But what you cannot do is react well to the unforeseen, which is, again, it comes back to StarCraft relevancy. Because I remember watching Dario on playing matches, and winning usually by just messing with people and just interrupting, taking the completely the perfect information environment of the initial let's build a build order, and just disrupting this enough to get to the point where the other people had to actually react and scramble.
And it happens so much in professional games still that one of the biggest advantages of doing damage early in the game isn't even the direct damage. Sometimes it's that the opponent doesn't even know where they stand in the game anymore.
Yeah.
Because, okay, the normal standard game of the first 5 minutes, he has played 3,000 times. But how often has he played losing 3 drones at that point in the game, and then a unit they usually don't see at that point coming in? And then it's so hard to suddenly judge how many probes does have my opponent, what's going to happen in the next 3 minutes. There's definitely all of that happening all the time, even at this point where StarCraft 2 is so much more figured out and people have played so much more and the level is so much higher. Extreme value of basically taking rigid systems and shaking them up, and humans have a really hard time breaking out of that unless they have a vast level of understanding of the game or the situation.
Yeah, no, basically what you're saying is if they've played so much that even your attempt to disrupt them is something they have encountered before, then they can get then it's something they can deal with again.
Yeah, and that's the thing where it's actually a little bit of a segue to AI. That's what something I think AI is really good at, and what I've learned from working with AlphaStar, that they have the chance of training every single situation 1,000,000 times, and then suddenly they are solid against that. But then they have the disadvantage of, if they encounter something completely new, a human would make in many cases an okay decision, not the optimal decision, but in AI it will completely fail and not at all know what to do because they can't generalize, at least yet. But I think that's where AI will come in the future, where, okay, I've just trained every single situation a billion times, so you can't really touch me like that.
And I mean, imagine in your experience playing with AlphaStar, I imagine you wouldn't end up with the same benefits of disrupting early in the game anyways, just because emotions aren't at play. It's I guess the AI doesn't get frazzled in that same way.
Yeah, it was interesting because usually I did worst in mid game. I just did best in completely unorthodox early game when I just do something completely random, and then I did best again in late game, because late game is very complex and also happens more rarely. So that's where my human ability of generalize suddenly is stronger, because I know how a broodlord and an infestor works. It doesn't matter if I do it at 10 minutes or 20 minutes. And
just be aware, and this is, I guess, at least this is going to my mind. What you just said is probably probably enough material for someone to write a PhD thesis in psychology.
Possible, yeah.
Because you are aware, just from experimentation with an AI, of a significant difference of humans to machines, and the implications of that are significant as it relates to how people tend to go with an orthodox way, and how bringing unorthodoxy into this has compounding effects far beyond the actual direct impact.
Honestly, if there's AI companies out there, hire StarCraft players to figure out problems and how to break it. Because StarCraft, in that sense, I started thinking about as the ultimate, what's it called? Basically, hostile attempt to break the system. Like it's there's a term for it that I'm forgetting right now in AI. That's basically. AI often functions well in a predetermined scenario, but if somebody's actually maliciously trying to break it, suddenly AI often doesn't perform this so well. And in StarCraft, we're always trying to break our opponent constantly.
Yeah. I feel like what you guys are talking about here a lot is like a kind of a broad understanding of kind of fundamentally how different things work. But I feel like that's all like, Tobi, what you mentioned about the playing an instrument and learning from that to build teams and whatnot, but then also about how StarCraft kind of relates over. This reminds me of something that I kind of started figuring out a few years ago, where I was kind of frustrated because there's so little written on StarCraft, right? There's you can't you go to any sport or chess or whatever and you read 100 books on it, right?
Yeah.
It's very, very easy. There's so much. And then there's almost zero on StarCraft. But then eventually I realized that there's there's plenty of books about StarCraft. They're named different things. Like I read, books on business that teach me about StarCraft. I read books on chess or different sports or psychology, any of that stuff. I feel like I'm always finding these things that it's like these kind of broad truths that as soon as you connect it to what you're actually thinking about, you learn a hell of a lot. And I think more efficiently than if someone wrote a book about StarCraft or something.
It totally goes both ways, and I think it shows why StarCraft is such an amazing testing ground for things like that. I remember specifically there was a time when I lost against the Soul Train, which is like an immortal all-in that happened a couple years ago. That was extremely hard for Zerg to defend. And at the same time, I was reading a book by an astronaut, and there was a section about how basically when something happens that a human would have a really hard time to act upon because they're panicked, it's happening really fast, they follow this checklist that through the decades of experience of people that have been in similar situations, they follow each point, and then suddenly they basically can execute the things without getting in trouble. And I started writing down a checklist how to defend the build order. And I was suddenly able to execute each step in order to defend it in half a second rather than a second, and then thinking about what to do next. And suddenly it became very mechanical, which is like almost the opposite of what we were talking about being really flexible. But sometimes actually this rigidity is the perfect solution again as well. And it's so interesting because every single book you read about any sport or competition or real life situations, it can be translated to StarCraft, which again makes you realize how StarCraft can also be translated back, right? It's almost like a language for us to interpret what works and what doesn't work.
It really is a remarkable game. I find it fascinating the way what you just said, because again, like all players start at the same time, like start with the same thing every time. It's like whoever wins just did better, right? And it's such a pure test of like over the course of playing 10 games against the same person, you probably will have a very good assessment of their aptitudes, or at least the current state of their own training. But like playing 10 games probably takes, I don't know, like this like I in my circle of friends, I have friends who've been couples for a decade and they don't probably understand each other's weaknesses and strengths to a degree. It's very revealing.
Yeah, StarCraft in a lot of ways, I always feel like it kind of shows you who you are, because I think you mentioned earlier, Dario, it's like seeing yourself in the mirror, kind of. Like all of your inadequacies come right out to the surface. There's nothing in the world like just playing someone that's simply better than you to find weaknesses that you just immediately, you're like, oh, I don't do this right. Like, simple as that, immediately. And I don't know. I feel like I mean, I have my fair share, as people know, of getting frustrated at the game, as I think many people do. But I feel like also it's a great way of like kind of self-improvement. It's like a samurai's journey in a way, because like, what are you really expecting out of this? Like, am I ever gonna? I practice StarCraft every day that I have some free time to do so, but am I ever gonna win money off this or something? No. It's
almost philosophical.
Yeah, it's more like, well, I want to keep refining this and becoming better because it feels worthwhile because of how hard it is, I guess.
Yeah, it's maybe it's like almost like a Buddhist journey, There's only so many people that can reach like the perfection, and everybody else, they can try to reach it, but they're still happy to be on the journey. And you're talking about how like it's an individual journey, right? But at the same time, it also taught me how blind you can be to your own mistakes. Sometimes, you're struggling in a matchup, or you really have a problem with a specific issue, and you talk to one other programmer, and sometimes within 2 minutes they can tell you, wait a second, why you're doing minute 6, or why you're taking the fight like that, or why is this happening? Everybody else is doing it like that. And then you realize for like half a year, you've like your win rate was 20% lower than it could have been, just because you didn't pay attention to that one thing that somehow everybody else but missed you. And StarCraft is a one-on-one game, of course, but it's such a almost like a hive effort how to become better and better. And we see it all the time that the players that are most connected and open to talk to other people actually become some of the best players on the planet.
So the definitive work on this mindset thing I talked about earlier is a book called Mindset, written by Carol Dweck. It's what she describes in the book is that this situation that you just touched on is one of the key sort of door 1, door 2 situations for most people. The majority of people, when they are doing something wrong and someone says, why are you doing it differently, will not react the way you did. Like, because what you did is like, this is the very, very pure growth mindset. It's let's say, oh, okay, I'll accept this as you have just become, you have selected to become my teacher in this situation. You told me something about what I'm doing, and this unlocks a new stage for me potentially, or I will end up rejecting it. But in either case, I'm going to accept this piece of information. the vast majority of people don't have that ability. And it's a very, very important thing to sort of understand. And honestly, one of a very, this is lesson 0 that we teach the moment we hire future high potential, like people we've deemed to be high potential into the company, is to explain this to them. Because what most people will say is, after someone says, hey, you should have done this differently, what they hear is not someone wanting to help. What they hear is someone else is passing judgment on my potential here. Someone else is like they're becoming kind of your enemy in that moment. That might be too strong a term. But it's a really interesting understanding, and it's a very interesting differentiation between people. And by the way, it's not an absolute thing. Everyone is fixed mindset in some things in life and growth mindsets in other things. So, but just being aware of this distinction has been hugely helpful in my life, and especially when coaching people.
This
yeah,
ties.
Go
sorry.
ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say this ties in kind of interesting to something that happened in the past in StarCraft, and I don't know if the stats are still the same, but for a while in GSL the GSL group format was winner plays against winner, loser plays against loser, and then the winner of the loser plays against the loser of the winner for advancement.
All right.
And what sometimes happens is that you have a match 1 between 2 players, and then they meet each other again in the deciding match. And somebody did the stats, and the loser of the first match had something like a 70% win rate in the rematch.
Crazy.
And at that moment, the winner almost became the mentor to the loser. It's like, okay, I'm showing you my strategy, which is winning. But the loser has now the option, okay, now I can play differently and make different choices, while the winner is in the awkward situation of, I just won what I'm playing. Now I either have to get out of my comfort zone of my winning strategy, which feels bad, or I have to play the winning strategy again, but my opponent knows that and they can counter it, and they in that meantime came up with a solution. And I think it's so important, a lesson that losing and making mistakes is actually what makes you better and stronger, because it's extremely difficult to learn from winning situations, because you never know if you won even just by luck. It's much harder to analyze a victory than a loss.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. And what I wanted to add to that was like the kind of open mindset, like the beginner's mind, the growth mindset, whatever you want to call it. I feel like a big part of that, and part of the reason why anyone who got good at StarCraft is probably, in your opinion, it seems like a good hire. And I would definitely, well, I don't own a company, I don't hire people, but I would hire StarCraft people if I did, because you kind of have to, I think, like, deconstruct your own ego in a lot of ways to be able to become better, because it's kind of that ego that's blocking it. If someone tells you like, oh, why are you doing it this way? This is like, that's not the way you're supposed to do it. Like, you can really get yourself wrapped up in your own perception of how good you are and how you see the game or something like that. But that's where you get stuck in like Masters League or low Grandmaster or something like that. Like you're going to get stuck there rather than, or
Yeah,
I guess what I'm trying to say is
I hate that when you get stuck there. That's
yeah. Well, I'm sorry. I know that you're Platinum. You don't have much time, but I'm talking people who like spend a lot of time, because I think that anyone can get good at StarCraft. I think that the whole talent thing, it's definitely real, but it is overrated if you're willing to kind of put your ego aside and work hard. Like, I thought I was very talented, and a lot of people thought I was very talented when I started playing StarCraft more than 20 years ago. And then when I got really deep into the scene, I met people that were actually talented, and I had to work, very hard and try to put that ego aside to try to, catch up or get on some sort of similar level. But yeah, that's it. I don't know. I think that that's another reason why this high level StarCraft players are just kind of valuable humans, is because they are able to kind of disconnect themselves from that to learn.
And I think I have some anecdotal evidence of that, is that, funnily enough, the most insults thrown at me when I'm playing on an anonymous account isn't by somebody who's high Grandmaster or like really good. It's always the people that are just on the cusp of being good players. Those people are sometimes the angriest people, and the only difference is their mindset. Like, they're mechanically just as good. They play okay build orders, but they're so unable to see the fault in themselves, and they start throwing insults at you why you lost the game, because the balance is bad, because I played stupid. And it's always this like small, like just, I don't know how it happens, but there's always this like a small scene of people that, you know, they could be amazing, but they're just blocking themselves from getting there.
Yeah, and they might actually have that breakthrough at some point, right? Like,
yeah, for sure.
due to the experience of the StarCraft, it might be potentially later in a different situation, but like, yeah. Let me ask you a question. Did you did both of you, like even before StarCraft, have you always been sort of more inclined to go for 1v1 games, like outside maybe in sports? Or look,
as soon as I kind of started figuring it out for myself, I definitely became competitive in 1v1 things. Like in my town, basketball was big, so that's what I played as a kid. But then, like when I started figuring out my own things, I really liked, for instance, Magic the Gathering. I started playing like lots of tournaments in that before I got into StarCraft. So I've always preferred that. I prefer to watch like 1v1 sports as opposed to team sports and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's same. It's I was lucky to grow up with 3 older brothers, but very early on in my life, we had 2 PCs, so it became very obvious for us to just play the RTS that we used to play by ourselves in single player. Just became 1-on-1, and it was just, I guess it was just because we didn't have 4 PCs, but so it just became this. Often we played like mini tournaments between the 4 of us, and then I also started playing Magic the Gathering, and I also played a ton of Quick when I was younger. And you know, I guess we played some team games, but when it, like the real competition was always, I wanted to be the best and duel against my brother.
It's funny. This is one of those things where I wonder if that might be a character trait, like sort of going, because I think one thing to recognize is that when you look around the video game environment, like the really, really popular games tend to be team games.
Yeah.
Which is also true in real life.
Regular
it's
sport,
like, regular sports, right? So.
And artists, even if you think about the most successful musicians, usually are bands more often than solo artists, right?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an observation. I don't actually have a point here, but like it's
I'm actually not sure if that's true. Like I'm actually relativizing myself, but I think it might be true, but I'm not actually sure if that's true.
Well,
I mean, one aspect of a 1-on-1 game is that you like is actually, like, to tie it back to an earlier point, is like you have no one to blame, right? It's just you. So that's probably not everyone's cup of tea.
No, certainly. People definitely, I mean, whenever I play like a team game or games with higher RNG type randomness to them, it's like that's all you hear is the blaming of that. And even within StarCraft, you'll hear, you know, people blaming, for instance, balance all the time, where it's like, dude, you're in silver, like you can get better than this and not have that, you know, even if it's slightly easier to play whatever race at that level, it's like there's like this infinite skill cap, so you can just keep going, and it's like one of those things that holds you back.
The funny thing is, a lot of times don't even realize that they're completely wrong, because I've had people complain about a matchup, then check their profile, and that was actually the highest win rate matchup, but just because out of personal preference, they hate playing that matchup. So emotion just completely clouds the decision as well, you know? You know, somebody tells me Zerg is way overpowered, I check their profile and they have an 80% win rate against Zerg, and I'm like, what am I supposed to do here? Like, is that not high enough?
So to pivot just slightly here, I do want to bring up your kind of, I don't even know what to call it, your gigantic donation to Home Story Cup. Because, you know, obviously there was like a big to-do within the StarCraft scene when you kind of came out of nowhere and offered Select the internship. And that was super cool, but completely unexpected while we were all over at Home Story Cup in Germany. Just suddenly everyone has their phones out and is kind of whispering. They're like, oh my God, like this huge donation. It was like $25,000 or something you gave to the Home Story Cup prize pool. Could you speak about that a bit? Like what made you think to do that? And
yeah, I started paying more attention to StarCraft. I mean, after I offered the job to select, but suddenly there was like everyone was so great about that, and I'm like, yeah, man, the StarCraft community I really miss it, and I installed the game and showed my kids, and so I was kind of into it again, and I was talking with my friend Jeremy, and I remembered watching Home Story Cup. It was just such a cool event, and I was sort of bummed that like GSL wasn't quite where it was back then, and then like Home Story Cup was this other thing, and then Jeremy mentioned that it happens this weekend, and I went to the website and was really psyched for it, and I was looking at the price pool, and I was like, man, it's still a lot of money, but it happened against the backdrop of the international and like Fortnite, like single afternoons getting you $3 million, and I was like, it just seemed that this community I really really love could just use a little bit of a push from behind, and I've been insanely fortunate, and so I get to spread a little bit of fairy dust around when in these kind of situations, and I knew that this would make a difference, and so I was actually talking with Dario a little bit because he was just, I think, packing up to go, or no, you must have been already there. And we quickly talked about this because I think I asked you like, hey, how can you make? Do you get enough money going there to even pay for a flight? Like I just wanted, like I also like I'm not too familiar with the entire situation. It just seemed like hey, let's go, let's do something, and then I decided and we did it, and honestly, it's been so cool. It just amount of goodwill and just sort of sheer happiness, and I think attention it got to the whole thing makes me really happy, and so that wasn't a great plan or deliberation or anything. This was a very spur of the moment kind of thing.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was super cool. So thank you for that, by the way. And someone that works at Shopify, was his name Jeremy?
Yeah, Jeremy. Yeah, same Jeremy.
Yeah, I got to speak to him quite a bit. He works in the recruiting aspect of your business, I believe.
Yeah, he's like now doing more esports.
Oh, cool.
We're like, okay, so let's do more. Like we'll figure out how to become more active. But yeah, Jeremy, basically because I was talking with him, it's like, hey, I can't. I think I had a financial call or something. I couldn't get away from one of us. Like, okay, you go. I was like, so he, I think he went from learning about Home Story Cup, talking to me about it, to being on the ground in Europe in like 12 hours.
But he has a little bit of an interesting background too, right? Because he runs the CEA, so the Corporate Esport Association. He's running the leagues. He's doing that on the side as a charity, more or less. So it's pretty cool to see like companies competing against each other, and Shopify is of course one of them that plays the StarCraft leagues, and I think some other games, but I'm actually not too familiar. I know there's like Dota and stuff like that as well, but I know the StarCraft team a little bit, and it's pretty cool.
Is that so? Would it be safe to say that you are like kind of excited to get possibly more StarCraft people to like apply for Shopify?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what the select thing is, it was custom because like he literally tweeted saying, I wonder where I can do like an internship or something like this, right? And I'm like, come here. We have a big internship program. It's amazing. Like especially like he's doing computer science studies. So for with us, like all the interns commit production code within very short time of arriving and so on. So it's a really cool program. So and so it's well built out. So this was easy. But the general idea behind it again is this sort of transferability of skill idea that we talked about, right? Like this, I just like you said earlier, I don't know how to access StarCraft people. Like I just don't know how to, like, no one puts it on my resume or CV, if you want to be as pretentious as I apparently am about it. So yeah, like I think this is an invitation. What Jeremy and I were having a conversation about is, if we haven't done it yet, but it's something we want to do, is we want to just put a completely alternative, like a section of our careers page, which is completely like invites people to give us completely different backgrounds. Like just forget about like if you have a degree from like an accredited degree, sure, go into normal bucket. But like if you are like a very accomplished StarCraft player, actually someone else we recently talked to was a Factorio speedrunner.
Cool.
Apparently that's a thing. And or like WoW guild leaders, or like just all this stuff. Like all of this is proof that you are someone who commits to becoming really good at something, and something that many people don't do, or like chess grandmasters, you've already hired some Olympians. And like all of these things are alternative proofs of perseverance and grit, which should count very highly for recruiting. But the reality is that most of recruiting is very orthodox. It's we want you to have 4 or 5 years of experience in C++ programming, and I'm always saying, like, what like, I mean, why years? This is a thing I find the weirdest about this. Like, because like wall clock time is so uncorrelated to skill.
Yeah.
Like you can spend, like Dario made the same point earlier. Like you can spend half a year trying to play against the build order, but what you're looking for is some kind of breakthrough. Once that could have happened 5 minutes into the deliberations about how to counter immortal trains, or 2 years down the road. It's completely unrelated to a wall clock. And so I think there's a little bit of a, I think the traditional education system does this. It sort of associates growth with time in a way that I find really unfortunate. It's like this year you learn algebra, and then this year you learn linear algebra, and then it's all kind of sort of fits neatly into these like predetermined time segments. And if you think about it, the way it's designed is that they make the times committed and static, and make the understanding variable. Like, because at the end of linear algebra time, you then get marked, and if your understanding is incomplete, you get like a C, or like if your understanding is very good, you get an A. So so we decided as a society, largely, to, at least for the purposes of the traditional education system, to make the understanding variable and the time static, which is, of course, like to me it seems entirely the wrong way around. Like clearly we should make understanding static, like get everyone to an A, and make the time invested entirely variable. The reason why we can't do this is because that's hard to scale with a teacher-pupil situation.
MMR school then.
Yeah, your grade is your MMR at that point.
Yeah. Oh God.
But that comes with all kinds of problems.
Like no show note links to my StarCraft profile, please.
You know, I love to hear what you're saying, where you're even thinking of putting on that secondary section for applicants on there, because that's something that I find really interesting as well about high-level StarCraft players. Even though I think that these are basically just very smart, hardworking people, there's a lot of us that, like, for instance, never went to school. Like Dario and myself never went to college. I'm sure there's plenty of the top pros. They don't go. Hey, there you go. You're a CEO at this point. So it's very cool of you to kind of have that ideal that you're working on. Yeah,
I really admire people who get the degrees and excel in this situation, but it wasn't for me either. I would feel it would be sort of hypocritical if Shopify would now go and only hire PhDs, because I mean we could, but like, but I don't think that leads to the best results. I think that gets you a certain kind of incredible individuals, but there's many kinds of incredible individuals, and I think this community specifically has a massive concentration of them. So yeah.
I think it's always important to say at this point, though, that definitely all three of us got incredibly lucky turning that into a career. And like for most people, the best path is to go the traditional path and do what you're doing as a hobby. And if then that hobby turns into something amazing, then you pursue it. But I've had so many people message me, you know, oh, Dario, I'm like 15, I want to become a pro gamer. Like, how do I do that? And I don't think there's like a way to do that, you know, like keep aiming for the more attainable things, but also keep, you know, doing following your dream of being a programmer, like practice and do that on the side. But you should probably allocate most of your time so to school, and not go for that less than 1% chance of fulfilling that. And if you're actually training to become a programmer or training to follow your passion, you will become a better person no matter the result of that in the end. So I think it's great to pursue that, but never expect a result out of it.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah, I quite like that. If you want to pursue anything within this, it's kind of like, if it's gonna happen, it'll happen, because you'll have the right breakthroughs and things. And it's like, it's hard for me to explain beyond that, but like, it's so ridiculously hard. It's like, I feel like it's like trying to become an astronaut or something. It's like, well, there's a lot of luck involved here, and like, is everything going to click for you at the right time so that you hit the right breaks and you make it into the right tournaments? And the thing is, I mean, I have no illusions of winning some sort of world championship, but I still practice because it's like a worthwhile thing, and I think it improves me. But yeah, you shouldn't throw everything away for it, I would say, even though some of us did and it worked.
And
that is survivorship bias right there, for sure.
And it depends so much on, which country you're from. For example, in Germany, ironically, Germany is one of the most risk-averse countries when it comes to the paths people go. And America is one of the most risk-taking. But actually taking risks like that in America is way more dangerous to your life and future than in Germany. Because in Germany, worst case, you could always go back to university and study for free and stuff like that. And there's a strong, like, countries that have good social security systems. I think that's where people should be taking risks and trying things out and taking here and there. And I don't know why, but I think it's cultural that, for example, in the US, people take way more risks, but it comes at much greater cost if they fail. And I would love to see more people in Germany and in countries that, take care a little bit more of you when it comes to those things, take risks there. I think it's such an opportunity in those places to try out more things.
I've definitely noticed that has been the case throughout my life, where all of my American friends would train way harder at StarCraft and do things like skip years of school. Whereas all my European friends would kind of be like, no, I've got to study. And I'm like, you're so much better than everyone. What are you doing? Like, you need to just buckle down for a little bit. They're like, no, man, I gotta get my degree on time. And I'm like, wow. As an American, that doesn't make as much sense to me. But it's a good thing you say. All right. Is there any other things that you guys want to bring up before we get into the community questions?
No.
Silence is we covered the topics pretty well.
Left no stone unturned.
Yeah. No, this has been an awesome conversation. I hope that you guys left us some good questions. Don't forget, if you want to leave a question, you still have a little bit. We close the questions in just a moment here, but check it out, patreon.com/The Pylon Show. All right. So these questions, I don't know what we're going to be getting into with this. Of course, if anything can't be answered, that's fine. If it's some question where you're like, what the hell is this? Such as someone asking, if you were a living banana, would you eat a living apple? You don't have to answer that as well. It's up to you. We get some really trolly questions in here sometimes. All right. Yes. All right. Into the Patreon questions. All right. Grassy Tiger asks, I want Special to win Katowice. I'm going to kidnap Serral, Dark, and Rogue and hide them in my basement. Is the Mothership the worst unit in the game? Why won't they buff it? Have you thought about doing a clips channel like JRE does? I think SC2 is like mixed martial arts, 1v1 to the death. Good job. Okay, well, that's a great one to open with right there, isn't it?
I mean,
is the
what was
mothership the worst
question?
unit?
Like, this is more like this is a statement. Yes.
Yeah, there's 2 question marks. All right, and everything else has periods. So we'll just go. Is the mothership the worst unit in the game?
I don't think so. I think the mothership. Well, actually, from a design perspective, yes. I don't think there should be hero units in StarCraft, and the reason why it can't be buffed is because it would create more Death Ball, and I think we've been moving away a lot from Death Ball lately. And the mothership core is like the ultimate unit to just make one strong army even stronger. Goes on top, strong air unit, and yeah, I just hate it. I think it's a bad concept.
All right. Why won't they buff it?
Because what I said, like it's just bad design.
Okay. Yeah. No.
That's how you really feel.
All right. Thank you for the weird statements and kind of question there, Grassy Tiger. All right. Leighton Lynn asks, so what's up with those swarm hosts? Am I right? These are some great questions, guys.
No, that's just cutting right to the heart of it. We've already done mothership and swarm hosts. So
oh no!
Yeah, really.
So I mean, I don't like the swarm host as a unit, but it's so much.
You're all aware. Like I've seen that video making its rounds around like sort of StarCraft's history.
Yeah, from
who did it again? It sort of
it was the score, which are actually here in Toronto as well.
Oh, awesome. So I mean, it sort of made 2 major assumptions, like assertions, right? Like second expansion and swarm host kind of killing it. One, and then the other one was sort of a GSL format one. Did you agree with the swarm host being singled out specifically?
No, I think it was a little bit of a lot of revisionist history. There was a lot of things going on behind the scenes. So many factors that are impossible to predict. Is it because League of Legends has an amazing business model, free to play, while StarCraft is going on? Those games are growing. Is it because people are moving over there? Is it because of Korean dominance and like mostly non-Korean fans? Is it the game? Of course, all of those are factors, but it's so impossible to say, okay, this was why. Not having views anymore. I think it's an impossible statement to make. But swarm hosts definitely didn't help. But the decline happened way before swarm hosts were even, the meta. It didn't help. But I don't think it's easy as that. And nowadays, swarm hosts are a lot different, and I think they're not the best units, greatest units, but they're okay.
Yeah, I think they're still pretty good. But I do want to point something out about that period in time, because everyone talks about the swarm hosts and how that ruined everything. But I do want to point out, and people always try to explain this way every time I bring it up, but whenever we had the crazy swarm host games that went for an hour, viewership peaked at every event, every time that happened. If that was on stream, every time.
What was the longest game you've ever casted?
Oh my God, that's a really good question.
So I know you didn't cast the Fire Kick Mana game, of course, because it happened in Europe. So that was the longest StarCraft 2 game in a competitive game, which was 3.5 hours, which was Swarm Host versus Protoss.
It's like cricket.
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know. I'm sure I've done like an hour and 10 minutes or so, for sure.
Yeah.
I think I've gotten that in both StarCraft 1 and StarCraft 2, at least once or twice.
Crazy.
Right. Thank you for the question. Leighton Lynn. Nahian asks, can you prove that you are not controlled by a pigeon inside your head? Probably with an X-ray. All right. Thank you for the question.
There's a lot of if you could look into someone's head kind of topic keeps coming up.
Yeah.
I mean, human in the end are black boxes, right? And I mean, of course, you can look into somebody's brain, but it's an interesting, almost philosophical question, right? Like, who's to say you're not a pigeon. Like even if your brain looks like that, maybe it's a pigeon.
Yeah.
Actually inside.
Yeah, and maybe the person giving you the X-ray is also a pigeon, and this is
exactly.
They
It's a
figured
big.
it out.
It's not it's not lizard people. It's pigeon people.
Yeah, it's maybe the pigeon in your brain just altering the picture that you see.
Yeah. It's impossible to tell.
I feel extra trolled today, by the way. Normally we don't have this many questions like this in a row, but anyways, onwards. Simonful asks, StarCraft is an underappreciated marketing opportunity. StarCraft viewer is an educated nerd with analytical and self-improvement skills. Why advertise Mountain Dew when you can advertise jobs like Bowringer at Home Story Cup? Tech Recruiter costs 20 to 30K. One hire equals big win. Do you consider sponsoring with Shopify?
I'm definitely considering it. I partly again because I'm really looking looking to help the community, but also this might actually end up being a win-win-win. So maybe I think that might happen to a certain degree.
Cool.
I definitely I could not agree more than with this statement. Like all the implied statement in the question.
Yeah, this is actually something that was always kind of funny to me because, like, for instance, every sponsor will go to League of Legends or something. This was a big problem several years ago, but that's like when you get a free-to-play game, it has a much younger audience. And then you look at the StarCraft one, and whenever we actually spoke to some sponsors that had tried multiple different games, it was always like, oh, StarCraft is like an older viewer base that's a bit more loyal and has more spending money than children who ask their mom to buy a skin, so
I mean, in my particular situation, it's just that like Shopify is software for businesses. It's like, I mean, I like there's for Oracle Arena in Toronto too. That's also software for business. So some B2B companies may do brand marketing, but Shopify is so specifically behind. Like everyone who's listening to this has used the Shopify store probably in the last like month or 2 or 3 or so, or at least been to one. So it just, you don't know, right? So I don't have anything to broadcast advertise. If I would have any kind of consumer product, I would be all over this because it just makes perfect sense to me. But yeah. Maybe I have to revive my snowboard store and just go all in.
There you go. Oh my God, a little side business.
I don't know if the overlap with the StarCraft community is too large.
Right. What product would be really good? I can make gaming mice.
Peripherals, right?
Yeah.
And you'd get a lot of input from people about how to do that, right?
These guys are doing really well. The Glorious Gaming Race, that's one of them. And Final Mouse and all these guys. They're doing great.
Oh, yeah. Oh, their marketing is really weird. It's very different. I enjoy following them on Twitter.
It is one of the stranger Twitter accounts, I have to confess.
Yeah. All right, cool. Thank you for the real question there, Simon. Optional Player asks, Shopify, Mark Cuban, A-Rod. People are seriously interested in e-gaming. I know viewers of LOL World Championship outnumbered NBA Finals years ago, and it's only growing. Given the newness of e-games, that's a stupid meme going around calling esports e-games. What do you think sponsors will do for it? I.e., change formats, fun tournaments, leave it alone, etc.
Good question. I think everyone's trying to figure this out. I would say there's a lot of money in esports. By the way, esport, now official German word, as of like 2 weeks ago.
Unfortunately, with the hyphen.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
I think email also has e-hyphen as the official German spelling. Like,
nice.
Anyway, there's a lot of money. I think there is probably as much money as there ought to be in it. It's probably just they incorrectly distributed. I think it's too spiky at the top. So I think one thing will hopefully happen is the curve is going to flatten a bit, and there's going to be more money for the long tail of events. Because that is something I think we will see as more and more companies get savvy. but right now you always see the most risk-taking companies lead. This is why Red Bull is just first in everything, right? And the sad thing is, like, most of the world of marketing and advertising is just extremely orthodox, and so it's very hard for the people with the budgets to just go and say, okay, let's go all in on esports, because it hasn't been de-risked for them. Like, this will happen. Like, it's going to be slowly, almost nothing, and suddenly everything. It's going to go like that.
What's really difficult for esports is that it's so global, and a lot of times it's local branches of companies that have a budget. So how do you sell now a tournament that is broadcasted globally? And you can say, okay, there's like this many people watching in Germany and this people watching in Italy, but that, okay, now I have the contact, I'm talking to Intel Germany. And he's like, well, I don't care about a viewer in Italy. Like, I only have a marketing budget for Germany. And, you know, even international companies are split up into local branches like that. And I think that's one of the biggest issues where esports faces the problem of being too global. And but that's also my favorite part about esports, that it is so global. And I think one of the reasons why we do see attempts of franchising, you know, we have the Overwatch League that is like happening in those different US cities, and then it's easier to market. But I'd rather find a solution for the companies to spend money somehow to and sell to an international audience, rather than esports having to become localized, because I think that takes away so much from what's valuable about it.
And unfortunately, this is going to just take some time, because, like, especially traditional companies changing the way they are allocating resources internally is one of those things that just moves at glacial speed.
Well, excellent question. Great answer, guys. Definitely, I've seen a lot of that as well. What you said, Dario, that the living in Korea, let me tell you.
Oh, yeah.
the local Korean sponsors that don't really do anything for the international audience as much. It's kind of very interesting. All right.
I was really excited. I was really excited when I finally had the occasion to use, like, Air Korea at some point, because, like, it's like, somehow I just was so into them. Like, because I've seen them in all these, like, I remember the games in the hangars, and
Korean
like, who knows what the value of that is, right? Like, there's no way for the companies to know, like, how much money they actually got out of people. Oh, wait, Air Korea? Like, every StarCraft fan would, like, pick that over any other airline.
Absolutely. Yeah, I went out of my way to take it.
Yeah.
It's worth it too. It's a good airline. I quite like Korean Air. Take it quite often. All right. Sate Zero asks, let's be real. Some things happen this week that need to be discussed. I would love your take on the recent drama with Nath. Just kidding. It's troll time. StarCraft 64 is now the only way you and only you are allowed to play on the ladder. Do you quit? Do you become a gateway man? Okay, so I played StarCraft 64. Yeah, I played it like 2 days ago on stream, because I randomly have it. I have a Nintendo 64. I plugged it into my computer. Woo! It's a
rough game.
It's hard to play without a keyboard and mouse. Let me tell you, trying to play on a joystick and drag select, and I was trying to learn how to micro units. Oh, there's a lot of latency in that game too.
So
no, I would.
Here's the question. What's the best race? Is it Protoss? It has to be, right? An N64 version of StarCraft?
I think it has to be, because you can just, like, attack move.
Or would it be Terran? Because if you just turtle with tanks and stuff like that, it's impossible to attack into it, because you can't micro against the Terran units enough. If that's just a defensive.
Yeah, it would be. The whole game is basically attack moving. Like, I tried to do a siege tank push.
Zerg will be terrible. I just know that. Zerg will
Oh, yeah. No, what could you even do with Zerg? The units are just weaker. You have to be able to micro if you're using Zerg. I would say it's probably Protoss, then Terran, then Zerg. I'll let you know. I'm gonna play it. I'm gonna play it one more time before it goes in the closet forever.
What I worry about is what's the corporate story behind that? Like, how did that game happen? Like, it's just like
because it was not done correctly. It doesn't look right. And the thing that was shocking to me, it was so dark. Like, it's so dark you can't even see it. Like, I had to put the gamma up on my monitor to even play, and you like can't see what's going on and the controls, and I don't know how that got made. I hope
we'll have to ask Mike sometime.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mike would know, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I'm sure this was a. You just
I'm sure after it came out, they shook their heads and were
you
like,
just
oh.
know, like no. First consultation, first meeting, like someone pitched this, and I just guarantee you there was some face palming already going on, and those weren't the people who were listened to.
Mm. All right, thank you for the troll question. Polly asks, how can you determine when an opponent has committed hard enough to a cheese that you just need to defend it? And how or when do you know the ball is back in your hands again? I know it's quite case by case, but whatever general answer you can produce is probably helpful to a lot of people.
Well, yeah, as you said, it's very general. So as somebody who's played the game as much as I have, you just get a feeling for, okay, if there's this many minutes at units at this minute, it means they need to have cut corners to reach that. Because I know there's not enough economy to make 20 salads at minute 5 while having complete probe production. So the first step for you to take to not have to gain that through intuition and thousands of games is to watch every single replay of when that happens to you and see, okay, it's minute 430 and my opponent has this many units and this much economy. And then the next time that happens to you again, there will be variance, especially in the lower league. Sometimes somebody will just have 8 workers fewer than they should have with the same amount of units. So in the lower leagues, it'll be a little bit hard to learn that because there's so much variance. But just writing down, okay, if somebody spent this many minerals on units or this much gas, they can't have more probes because it's mathematically impossible to do that in the game. And scouting as much as possible in the game will teach you to learn and interpret that information in real time. The more, one of the advice I actually give nowadays for StarCraft is try to interact with your opponent as much as possible at your skill level. Because by interacting with your opponent, by scouting, by harassing, you will start learning how game states look like. If you're just in the dark throughout the entire game and like just playing single player, basically, it becomes impossible for you to learn game after game, how game states look like. And it's so important in StarCraft to know, where do I stand? Where does my opponent stand? Because it makes all our decisions different. If I know I'm ahead, why should I be attacking right now rather than taking another base if I'm far ahead enough that I actually don't need to do anything, just keep doing what I'm doing and then left click in their base and nothing can stop me from winning. So interact.
Yeah, those are actually really fantastic tips about it. I want to mention, because another part of the question is, how do you know when the ball is back in your hands? You just kind of have to understand how what they are doing is going to scale against what you are doing. So for instance, if they're low on probes, for instance, and just have lots of units, then you should have some sort of idea like, oh, maybe when I have 2 more upgrades than them and I've just held on for a certain amount of time, it'll kick in that their economy is no longer providing enough army to keep up with my army plus upgrades or something like that. All right. Good question, Polly. Good luck in your games. Aaron McLeod asks, question for Tobi. I visited the original office in Ottawa that was 1 floor in the Byward Market. If I recall correctly, some of the office rooms were named after the StarCraft races. Do you still have offices named after the races in the new and much larger space you occupy today?
That's so fun. Yeah. There's one meeting room called Zerg and Protoss and Terran, and I think there's a Hydralisk somewhere, and it's nice. but honestly, this was true. I think actually our first meeting room was called Hatchery or something.
Nice.
That became really awkward because people were like, most people's association with hatcheries is not actually that positive.
Yeah.
So we always kept this up, but honestly, like we have, there's a lot of meeting rooms. You really have to come up with naming schemes after a while. Let's scale. So yes, that's
awesome.
true. Actually, but it's a good point. Like it's fun to see just how much. Yeah. Anyway, StarCraft is sort of reoccurring theme, it seems, and even Shopify and StarCraft are weaving in and out. It's cool.
I like it. You have good taste in naming your rooms. All right. Thank you for the question, Aaron. Paragleber asks, the Democratic primaries for U.S. president election are happening soon. Make sure to register in time. Do you want to ask people to vote or maybe even endorse a particular candidate? For example, StarCraft fan Andrew Yang. With how many followers you have, maybe you can make a difference. I mean, I'm not very interested in getting into politics.
No, I think that's great.
Everyone vote for who you want. Or don't vote. That's your choice too, and just do that. And I'm gonna keep talking about StarCraft.
Yeah, good choice.
Yeah, everyone just do your thing. All right, thanks for the question.
I'm just gonna say, don't vote for somebody just because they like StarCraft.
Yeah,
it's not the only factor.
Yeah. Take a macro.
That's
view.
fair.
Look at everybody.
Not the micro view.
Look at everybody as a complete picture. That's all I'm asking.
Yeah. You should know more than that. Like Dario, if you ran for president somehow, I would definitely vote for you. But I know more about you than than just that you like StarCraft. So there you go. All right.
It's usually pretty tough to run for president for Germans in Canada.
Yeah.
That would be rather difficult, considering you weren't born here, unfortunately.
Yeah.
What a weird law that is. All right. Yeah, that means none of my kids can be president, by the way. How sad.
Wait, even...
They're half Canadian, though, so maybe they can go over there and be president.
Yeah, that works.
Well, are your kids Prime Minister? They don't have any U.S. citizenship being...
Well, they have U.S. citizenship, but you have to be born in America to run for president.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah, right, because that's how the whole Obama thing happened, right?
Although apparently, like apparently it's been tested, but if you dig on this one to figure out like what part of what document they're interpreting in that way, it's really, really dicey. So it's
really?
Yeah, that doesn't really look like the gentleman of enlightenment intended for that to be so.
Maybe one day. I have dual presidents, America and Canada. All right. Thank you for the question. Foot asks, do you think StarCraft 2 would benefit from a rivalry between two top-level players who legitimately and publicly did not like each other, or would it be detrimental to the scene? I think it would be. It would benefit StarCraft 2, I would say. We've had it in the past.
People love drama.
For a certain amount of time, did not like certain people. That was true.
Yeah, in the game at least. Yeah,
I think I know who you're talking about.
He's cool with everyone now, but there was definitely periods where he was not happy with people. But yeah, no, I think it's probably not a healthy thing. You probably shouldn't not like people, but it would probably be good for the game.
It's good. It's probably good. It would be good content. It's good fun.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end, the viewership comes for the entertainment value, and the entertainment value gets higher the for more vectors and like they are. So.
Yeah.
Anyone volunteering for being the guy?
Yeah, who's the heel and who's the?
I would totally be a heel if I was, but I'm not good enough to matter. So I would totally do it though. All right, thanks for the question. Pulse asks, "Hey guys, to Tobi, I'm a senior programmer, and your presence in the scene motivated me to apply for a job at Shopify.
Sweet.
With that said, what do you think are other essential skills besides the growth mindset for a programmer to be considered? Hoping to see more of you and Shopify in the scene."
I mean, I gave away a lot about the interview process already, so that helps. But again, I think the most important thing is speaking from a perspective of like what we are really lucky. We are a very desirable company to work for. One mistake we find that a lot of people make is they end up I think misrepresenting what they could be doing by just telling us like how much they want the job or how much they want to work for a company. It's a very natural place to go because I would recommend for people who are sort of applying for a job with us, but really with any place, to be able to explain, like back to the jazz band, like what instrument are you, like what becomes better by you being there? Like I think taking that approach to explain why you want to work in a certain place and what kind of problems you can solve. Like everyone has a role and skill set. You know this about just for what reason do your friends call you up to go out to town? Like, what becomes better? Is it just more fun? Is like, are you a responsible one and make sure everyone gets home safe? You know, like there's this, like people play roles, right? People make certain problems not go away. And so I think articulating that is a good way. And the nice thing is, then it gives you an opportunity to talk about your sort of alternative backgrounds, like the skills you might have gotten by playing StarCraft, being a Factorio speedrunner, or whatever, and it gives you a bigger canvas for conversation. And I think that's the advice I would give.
All right, very cool. Good luck with that. Hyper Turtle asks, if you've been following it, what is your take on the Warcraft 3 Reforged launch? Should release have waited until it was in better shape? Did the scaling back of features and campaign changes over the last year classify it as the scam players are labeling it as? I wouldn't call it a scam.
Yeah, no, that's a scam.
That's a bit harsh.
It's not a scam, but you know, I think almost any game, the quality of almost any game would benefit from being delayed rather than being released with a lot of problems. Attention spans of people are very short, and if you release a game with a lot of problems, it's way harder to get the people back in hindsight if your game is great in 1 year than if you would just retain them. And that's true for everything, right? It's once people are gone, it's so hard to get them back. And it's sad. Like, it really bothers me that now decisions are being made like that, where it's more important for certain people at Activision, Blizzard, to push for short-term profits rather than having the long-term vision of delaying, maybe investing more money, but then having something that could last for a really long time, and that builds a legacy and that builds trust. I think Blizzard still benefits a lot from its history, that if Blizzard brought out a game, it was amazing, and people would just buy it instantly and don't even wait for reviews, and they would have so much trust. And every time this is happening right now, they're eroding the trust, and in long term, people are not going to be doing that anymore. If you bring out a bad game now, people will wait a little bit. They won't pre-order as much. They won't buy your game until they saw the reviews. So I think it's actually ridiculously short-sighted of what is happening at that company at the moment. And I wish they could see the value of what they used to have.
Can't disagree with what you said there.
Yeah, it seems a little bit like, I mean, one thing I really appreciated about Blizzard, and I hope they can get back there, is that they really made quality the static thing and time variable. And I think their games benefited tremendously from this. It's unlikely that this was the case for this particular project. It seems like they picked a date. They gave themselves an extra 30 days, but chipped it based on what it was at that point, rather than waiting for a certain fixed set of quality standard. I haven't played it. I mean, Warcraft 3 is an incredible game. So like, I think the Twitter mob can work itself into a frenzy at times. I'm sure this is overstated. I think what people are bemoaning is sort of a lack, the lost potential of what the game could be.
And what's really sad is it's not just something new that came to be that's not great. They don't let you play the original Warcraft 3 on their launcher anymore. So that's actually gone. Like, of course, some people have, Warcraft 3 has local clients and stuff like this, but they're not just tarnishing a new game, they're actually destroying an old game unless they fix this. And I think that's just tragic.
What's the one thing that they could change about Warcraft 3 that would get people to be sort of okay with it?
Right now,
I saw so many complaints. I went to the subreddit. Some of the complaints were crazy. They're like, they took away the news, and the news hadn't been updated in 6 years. So it's
so who cares about that?
Like, yeah, it's, you guys are just complaining about anything you possibly can. The one thing that stuck out to me, because I played it yesterday for a few hours, and there's not really a ladder.
Yeah,
like, that's, I mean, especially for the hardcore scene that really wants to play. I mean, I know that we always hear these things about how like single player is like the most played and stuff like that. Okay, but for games to like last for 20 years, it's generally like you should have a multiplayer that functions pretty well. And so in my opinion, that's what I really want to see. I want to just have just a regular ladder.
So is there like a hidden MRR, or is there just nothing?
No, you can only do custom.
Someone said there's not.
You can only do custom.
Yeah, yesterday you could only do custom games. I heard that there was matchmaking in like previously, but there was no MMR with it. So you could hit anybody, I believe, but I'm not. It didn't work yesterday, so I couldn't really test it.
Has there been any word on them adding that back in, or nothing so far?
I think there has been very little communication, right?
Because MRR on a ladder system was part of our original Warcraft 3 release, right? Like if I remember that right, it was really well done. Even they sort of iterated on it, but yeah, that's disappointing.
And the funny thing is,
someone says there's hidden MMR. Someone in the chat is mentioning that it's a hidden MMR system.
Okay, but the funny but also kind of sad part is that they also botched the single player. You know, the animations are weird. They showed like really great in-game like animations for the storyline and stuff like this. But having a great ladder would actually distract from the fact that part didn't go so well. So like now people are actually stuck playing the campaign that otherwise wouldn't. And there's even like streamers who like otherwise would be playing multiplayer. And now instead they're showing like the really buggy campaign that doesn't live up to what they were showing either. So they're really shooting themselves in the foot there. And yeah, we'll just have to see if it'll become better. I hope so. Like I really, really hope so.
I'm sure that they will fix a lot. Like there was a lot wrong with StarCraft Remaster over the last couple of years, but it's in a really nice spot right now. Like it works really smoothly. Everyone's getting happier with every patch, and it's been a process, but it's in a good place. So, all right. Thank you for the question, Hyper Turtle. Red Gunner Guy asks, I'm organizing StarCraft 2 tournaments locally in Singapore. Organized one, planning another. Funds to keep it going long term. Looking for local grassroots and sponsors. What should I do when approaching potential sponsors? Any don'ts? Any advice? No idea. Never done this before. Thanks. I have no actual experience in that. TLO, do you have any experience with sponsorship stuff working with Team Liquid?
Not super deep advice, but one thing that I think is important to definitely be realistic and honest. Don't and maybe that's bad advice from this actually making money. What I see on grander scale all the time is that people take like general numbers of what esport is and try to sell it to partners, and then suddenly your product is like has nothing to do with that. If you tell people, okay, there's like 3 billion people that play games, but like your game only has 1,000 active players, that has nothing to do with each other, right? So definitely be straightforward, be transparent. A lot of times you'd be surprised how willing local sponsors are to do local events. So don't approach international companies, but if there's a bar, or if there's like a small shop that somehow is like close to your venue, or like somehow related to what you can do, those are the people that are going to be much more willing to give you money. Is there like a local internet cafe that you can promote, and your viewership, your audience actually will go there and check it out? I think that's the best approach based on your scale. If you have a small event, try to find small sponsors, because they're going to be much easier to work with, and they'll be an international company has such large budgets and such large goals that they're not going to give you $500 to do something, because that's just a waste of their time. But the local shop, the local internet cafe, they might be like, okay, cool, like I'll give you $100, or I'll give you the monitors for the tournament, and that can be meaningful to you, right? Like suddenly, okay, cool, I can pay my volunteers a little bit and do this. So just know what you are and see what you can approach around you.
Cool.
That's great advice.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for the question, and good luck with your tournament organizing. All right. Alessandro asks, Tobi, I would like to know more about the Corporate Esports Association. How did Shopify become involved? How seriously does the team take it? Are there coaches and team training like Jin Air? I really like this league. Best of luck this season. And to all, what is the creative strat you are proudest of? All right. I don't know if you know about that, but the CEA.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that much about the CEA, other than that Jeremy's heavily involved in creating it, getting it off the ground, promoting it, all these kind of things. So like Shopify is basically just a participant, and just Jeremy happens to work at Shopify. But yeah, the team's taking it pretty seriously. Like the StarCraft Slack channel in Shopify is pretty busy, and the other games as well. Is there some coaching, maybe some cross coaching? Like the good players hang out with others. Like luckily, Discord makes it really, really easy to do an internal stream now. So it's like super easy to drop in and just give people advice. That's the kind of that's one dimension of games that I wish would have been around for much longer. So in this way, yeah. Now we're taking, I don't know, are we taking it seriously? No, we're taking having fun very seriously. That's what we do.
Cool.
Also, TLO hangs out there and every once in a while.
Yeah, no,
tells us what we need to hear.
I have a little bit of a bias now, or if Amazon maybe doubles the price pool of a StarCraft 2 tournament,
that gets you a
maybe I'll coach their players a little bit too. I'm just saying.
This is how we grassroots this community. It's like, if you want TLO in your Discord,
there you go.
Every Discord needs a TLO in it. That's a good thing.
And the second part of the question, is there a creative strat that you guys are proudest of? Some sort of creative strat that you do? I think this is very TLO biased.
Yeah.
Mr. Creativity.
Well, honestly, it's a super crazy throwback, but I'm still proudest of my GSL strategy against Lucera in 2010 on Salnaga Caverns, when I was beating him with pure Hellion almost into Thor. And I was, at that time, a Hellion had just one more range than a Roach. And I found out that even though a Roach theoretically is way better in a 1v fight against a Hellion, like one Roach would beat 3 Hellions almost. But I figured out that you could kite Roaches just with Hellions. And then suddenly, if I make a lot of Hellions really early on and put on constant pressure, I just have enough time to constantly kite the Roaches until they get to my part of the map to put on any pressure. And then I would follow up with way faster Thors out of 3 factories than you would normally do, and then do a follow-up push. So basically that taught me really early on, you can basically break the rules of the game if you understand what's going on, and then maybe you can find a shortcut. Another one is actually a little less flashy, but and I'm not doing it enough, but it's two different creep techniques. Actually, 3 different creep techniques, because creep is very interesting. Creep is giving you infinite potential to be better as a player. Nobody is spreading creep perfectly, and I think it's one of the coolest mechanics in StarCraft. And one is hotkeying creep tumors, so that as soon as the hotkey, as soon as the cooldown comes down, I can double press the button, jump to the tumors, and have perfect, timing. And if you do a timing attack with like Green Roach, something like that can be vital. But the tricky part of that is you need to re-hotkey each time you make new tumors, because it won't, transfer, of course. But basically what you do at that time is I invest half a second now where I'm in control of the game, where I know nothing else is going on, and I can decide to pay attention to that, to then in 15 seconds later, or even in a minute later, not have to invest as much time. Like, it's like banking time for later on. Because if I'm like fighting against my opponent and really busy doing other stuff, but then suddenly, okay, cool, 5 seconds, nothing's going on. Now I can just double press out hotkey, jump to the tumors, and spread creep again. Suddenly I can do that in between other things, which otherwise I might not be able to do. The second is I actually use the keyboard arrow keys to spread out overlords. So I learned to use the arrow keys on the keyboard and the right shift of the wire grid overlords at the bottom to like just spread out overlords in like a line across the map. And nobody else is doing that, and I'm also not doing it enough, but I need to train it more.
So what's the significance of arrow keys when you do that?
Basically, I can deselect overlords while I'm scrolling down the map. So I can use the mouse to deselect overlords to like drop them off one after another. while scrolling across the map with the arrow keys. So I can use my mouse to
I get
deselect
it.
while
Okay.
still at the same time scrolling, which usually you can't do.
I see. Okay, so okay, the arrow key is your constant speed, like move of the camera.
Yeah, and then they evenly space out as a line.
That's sweet. God.
And the third one is just using drop overloads with queens to spread creep in unusual locations. I love creep. Creep is cool.
To speak to the arrow key thing, that's kind of cool to hear, because the only other time I've heard about arrow keys realistically being used by a professional was Boxer while microing vultures so he could keep them centered on his screen. Just throwing that out there.
Well,
Very cool.
he is a fan of mine.
Yeah. And Toby, do you have any creative strats that you like?
Nah.
No. Pretty standard.
I once did a bending drop. That was cool.
All right. Excellent. It's a strong one. Thank you for the question, also. Oh, for me, I've been toying with Cloaked Ghosts in late game Terran vs. Zerg, and I won a tournament game with it, so I was pretty happy.
And we are, just to clarify, we are talking about Brood War, which is like way crazier than in StarCraft 2.
Yeah. The ghosts are absolute garbage. So, but it has a place in my game right now, and I'm kind of proud of it. All right. Fear Dragon asks, Toby, for large companies better known than events they sponsor, what do you feel are the biggest benefits in sponsoring esports stuff when you don't get more brand recognition?
So that's a general question about other companies in general. I mean,
yeah.
One thing,
like
a lot
the
of
company's bigger, I guess you don't get the brand recognition if it's bigger than the event.
Yeah, I don't know. That's really hard to answer in the general. I mean, a lot of companies measure things like unaided awareness of a brand, which is not 100% for any brand in the world, like maybe Apple and Coca-Cola, but outside of that, even Red Bull is still trying to get unaided awareness. So I don't think you ever saturate that kind of thing, but I mean, this is exactly why it's hard. One thing which is important to realize is we are in times of significant amounts of data being available, and almost all companies in the world are entirely addicted to performance marketing, right? Because like if you are a energy drink company and you're gonna go bid on energy drink related terms on Google, because when people want to, they have intent to purchase this, they're going to Google to search for it, or and then it's an auction for the keywords. And the nice thing is everyone can pay these ungodly sums per click because it's directly attributable. Like you know if you make the sale from the transaction afterwards, right? And so it is like it's the most equivalent thing to a game of perfect information. Again, like it's more like chess than poker or StarCraft, where the entire world of brand marketing and sponsoring events and all these things, this all exists in basically the realm of faith. You kind of have to. You will never get such direct attribution of anything. You just have to kind of hope that its benefits will somehow accrue and be north of what money you invested in. So, I mean, I would say in most cases, companies are attempting to do this kind of thing, like get more than they put in. I wouldn't trust companies in general to be just sort of charitable or invest money because it's cool, because that's becoming rarer and rarer. So yeah.
All right. Good answer. Is two other questions. Dan, why do you look happier playing StarCraft 64 than Brood War? Probably because it doesn't mean anything. So it's hard to get frustrated when you're doing something that literally means nothing to you in the whole world. Anything could happen in StarCraft 64 and I wouldn't care. And for Dario, he says, you're cute. Thoughts?
Oh, I mean, I guess, one person agrees.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, Big Polar Bear Walking to you. Thank you, Fear Dragon. All right, we got a couple more in here. Mako Plux asks, Toby, should I mention StarCraft 2 Grandmaster, WoW Arena Rank 1, and Overwatch Top 500 in my application to Shopify, or will mentioning the games count against me with HR? I'm a staff UI engineer who works a block away, and my friends say great things about the company.
Sweet. Please do. Please mention it. I would be so happy if people start to be like own their accomplishments in video games the same way they would own their accomplishments. Like, you better believe that people who excelled in traditional sports put that in their CVs, right? Like, so what people like? I mean, all those accomplishments are I mean, those are significant accomplishments, right? Like, well, they're part of your life story. So it's so funny that we keep having this conversation. I mean, it's a real conversation, and absolutely there would be places where you would put that on there, and you would probably go into the quaint stack. But I think it's time for people to like own all their accomplishments digitally and otherwise. So
it's almost a filter for the person itself as well, right? Of course, people don't always have the luxury with employment, but if you really, really care about gaming, would you want to work at a place that would like not accept you for being that person?
Totally.
And
good point.
Of course, not always that's a choice, but I think people should be who they are and should be allowed to do that.
Cool. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I mean, that is very high up on 3 games. That's sick. All right. Cobra, our producer, asks, question for Toby. If you can speak on it, what did Shopify grow and learn from something like Jeffree Star and Shane Dawson's cosmetics launch overloading Shopify servers?
So one of the craziest things, let me give a bit of context there. Like, so again, Shopify, e-commerce, online stores. Like, if you bought something, it wasn't on Amazon and you liked the experience, that was a Shopify store. And so we have a benefit of just seeing some of the craziest stories that are out there. Like, it's like right now, it's especially people who have built significant audiences and on YouTube or Instagram or so are learning how to I'm trying to make a decision of how far to go back. Like, it used to be that like I remember growing up in Germany, it was Michael Schumacher was the biggest star, and he would be on in the ad breaks shilling toothpaste or whatever. People had fame, and then they cashed it in on the other side, like to sell a product. What's now happening, and Jeffree Star is an extremely good example of this, is that these people who have the fame just realize that instead of shilling someone else's products that are sort of subtractive from my relationship with my audience, instead I'm going to make products that are representative of what the thing I actually do. And then when the people purchase them, that is actually additive. So like in Jeffree's case, like Jeffree teaches the internet how to use makeup. Hey, I make my own makeup kit, buy it, and I'll teach you over the next couple of months how to use it. This is a really, 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 it's a much better thing than Formula One drivers selling toothpaste or Nissans or something. You're just like, so now in some cases, these audiences are so big that that can even lead to problems in our case. So Shopify has about $50-60 million worth of servers. And in this particular case of like a flash sale that Jeffree Star put on, this ended up, like all of Shopify ended up working on this sale. Like, this is the way it's sort of elastic. It's like basically the internet was selling cosmetics for a bit. Like, a significant percentage of the internet's traffic was cosmetic sales. So to the degree that we couldn't handle it and actually went down. And them being on YouTube, this was all filmed and it's something you can go watch. And it's actually, it took me, I watched the entire video, of course, but it took me probably like 3 days, the pauses to get through, just because it was like, it's actually really emotional. It's a cool, it's cool seeing the other side. So, well, we've learned a lot. We learned we need more hardware. We learned that YouTube is insane in terms of the reach it has. Met some amazing, like we exchanged some emails and hopefully get to meet at some point. So I met some new people who are just doing incredible stuff. It's honestly my favorite thing about the Shopify story. Again, remember I started it because I started the snowboard store, and I fell in love with being an entrepreneur, and it's something I want, like, and then Shopify ended up being such a important idea to myself, because I realized instead of building my own business, I can actually help other people do the same thing, be entrepreneurs, which is, you know, a really cool thing. At this point, someone has their first sale on Shopify about every 50 seconds.
Wow.
It's gotten so common, and so but the stories behind this are just amazing. And so being able to especially now sometimes see this in videos is super, it's mind bending. So really cool.
Wow, that's awesome. All right, and he has a second part of the question for everyone. How can we engage the next generation in games like chess and StarCraft beyond just showing our own family members? Thanks, an oversized dehumidifier. Okay. How can we engage the next generation in games like chess and StarCraft beyond our own families?
Well, you know, creating some level of infrastructure for it, I guess. In traditional sports, there's amateur coaches that teach people the game, right? Like the way to is we need people that are active to just go out there and teach somebody and show them the game. You know, if they never hear of it, how can they play it? And the best way to do that is human-to-human interaction, right? So don't be shy about the game that you love. I would love to see more amateur competitions that people could aspire to. Local competitions where, you know, somebody that lives in a small city has something to play for, even if they're never going to win a GSL. But it's kind of cool, you know. I won a tournament in my own like hometown. Like I know how that feels. That's one of the best feelings. And you know, I'd love to see some programs in schools and stuff like that, of course, but we are pretty long way from that. So I think it'll just have to be private initiatives for now, and really trying to explain to people what are the benefits that we talked about this episode, that it's not just a game, it's a tool. Just like, you know, games in general are tools for people to learn things, right? It's why are animals playing in the wild? It's so they learn certain skills that will help them survive in the wild. And why are we playing games nowadays that are very cognitive? Because we live in a very cognitive world. And just people understanding that will help a lot. And then we just need people that are really active and build small communities.
That's so well said. I think it's like it's been really cool, because again, like the Venn diagram intersection of my sort of Twitter following and then all yours is a little bit different. So with me not just talking more about StarCraft, I have now been getting a good deal of outreach and emails from like investment bankers who said, hey, I saw you talk about it, I tried to analyze it, try to make sense of why you say this is important. But I showed my kids and I love it, and send me pictures of them playing. And I think it's just so underexposed. It's so like this game just needs the exposure. It is like, we can absolutely quibble with components of it, but as it is an incredible game. If the game would be released right now, new in the state it's in, it would be a smash hit. But it's the problem is momentum, right? There's inertia there right now, and I think actually the things like ESL taking over some of the tournament circuit is going to help. I think people talking about the transferability of StarCraft skills more openly is going to help. I would like to see the community make more content for new players. There is a lot, but not all of it is family friendly. And I think this is something like if you look at the best thing is having an instructor in front of you. That's hard to scale. All the kids growing up now are on YouTube watching YouTubers do Minecraft and copy their builds, and like they're so used to this interaction form that I think it's a little bit the content is missing, and so I think that's something I think which would help a great deal.
Yeah, definitely do agree with that. I think it's hard. A lot of the people that are involved making StarCraft content, like for me, for instance, I don't even know how to explain this. I'm like learning as I teach my daughter how to play, how to explain it, because I don't, someone who's never played, I don't know what language to use because I speak in this whole other tongue to people like
and especially
Dario
to a child, right?
Yeah.
Like we need to and I think this is a great opportunity for new people to break into this as well, because you don't need to be a top 200 grandmaster player to teach somebody the game.
No, totally.
Anybody that's playing this game can teach somebody that's not quite as good as they are, and to teach the game. And I think what maybe our mission would be as the people that really know the game is to explain those general concepts that we've been talking about, and then the people that are not quite as good can take those and transfer it into their language and their understanding of the game. And there's this effect of just transferring that knowledge down, trickle down knowledge economy. It could actually work.
Sure.
And I always think YouTube content is definitely missing, but it's hard for people to get started on that. But actually, it's not hard. I think it's hard for people to get traction. But I'm sure.
Yeah.
It might exist and we just don't know it. That's a problem, right? Like it's
Cool. All right, excellent question and excellent answer, guys. One last question, and it is from Shane. Shane asks, for Tobi, Shopify has a powerful platform. Should more games, especially in esports, expose data through APIs? Why? I don't know what that is.
It sounds like a binary question. The answer is yes.
Okay.
I think we need to here's the crazy thing. Like just imagine how much you would know about any other sport, any other activity. Like how much better would players be at tennis if we would have all the data of every muscle they ever moved in doing any of the games, doing any the thoughts they had, the decisions they ever made, like just every interaction, like every turn of the millimeter turn of the racket and so on, and had that for every player out there. Like we actually do have that for StarCraft, right? Like we have a replays. Like it's such an incredibly powerful. Like StarCraft is already so interesting, but once you realize we actually have the perfect record history of all of it potentially, it becomes so much more interesting for so much more study. And the fact that that's not really, nothing is done with that at least I'm aware of, feels a little bit like a missed opportunity.
And by the way, I just want to point out, because almost no other game has this, how amazing are StarCraft replays. Because you have a replay with all the information just at like 2-digit to 3-digit kilobytes.
Yeah.
Because it's just literally every command, and then the engine can recreate what happened in the game. It's not a video. It's literally just a text file, and it gets played again. But you don't even need to run the StarCraft 2 client. You can just analyze, with a program that parses everything that's happening, and then extract data out of it as well. And I'd love to see more games that have that kind of stuff. Like nowadays, there's games still shipped that are huge games nowadays. They don't even have a replay function. Or their replay function is a video function. And that's how do you extract? Then you're at the same thing as recording a video on your monitor, and that's not, you don't get anything out of that. And I think StarCraft stats are still underutilized, even though we are quite lucky. But often it comes down to resources, that maybe a production team doesn't have a dedicated person that does nothing but create stats for the tournament, you would need to know somebody really, of course, high knowledge that can work with the production team to create those graphics. But man, the statistics in StarCraft are so fascinating. And we are really, I think StarCraft is actually the top game with the best, access to that compared to any other game.
Yeah, you're quite right though, I think, because if we had like a bigger scene, like if the StarCraft 2 scene was as big right now as the League of Legends scene, I think that replays would basically be gold, and they'd be hoarded more, and they would be not shared as much, and there'd be a ton of data coming out for top players and teams that would help them out. All right. That does it. That is all the questions that we have. Thank you so much, guys. Before we go, just a quick shout out. Check out our Patreon, patreon.com/The Pylon Show. Thank you everyone so much for supporting us over there. And check out thepylonshow.com. That has absolutely everything Pylon Show related, including our show notes. If you want to know what's going on or find any links about whatever we've talked about or haven't talked about for the week. Also, do check out Matcherino, matcherino.com/The Pylon Show. And corn chip is our question or our answer, whatever you want to call it, the coupon code. That's it. Where you can just create free money for us. It's wonderful. And of course, we have some various things that are brand new up there for sale if you want to partake. And that just about does it. Guys, thank you so much for coming on today. This was an amazing episode. I love the conversations we have. Before we go, why don't you guys just tell us where people can find more of you, follow you, and all that. Dario, let's start with you.
Sure, absolutely. Always definitely follow me on Twitter /LiquidTLO or @LiquidTLO. And most important to me is actually my stream. So twitch.tv/LiquidTLO. Give my channel a like. I'm trying to break through 80,000 followers. And, I'm trying to explain the game more and more. Some days I'm going to focus more on practicing. But if you have any questions about the game, I'm always happy to talk you through it. And my mission is becoming to teach people general understanding of StarCraft, because so many times I see people being taught build orders or really specific case by case things. But I think the mission should become to teach economy, to teach general understanding that you can then apply to your skill level, and then magic can happen. So yeah, check my Twitch out, and I'll be back to streaming probably tomorrow, definitely very soon.
Cool. And Tobi, what about you? Where can people follow you, learn more, see you again, all that?
So I'm on Twitter at Tobi, and I'm outside of that. After wonderful conversations like this, I probably have to turn into into a pumpkin again and go more into the direction of business stuff. So thank you so much for letting me spend an entire evening talking about something completely different than what I usually talk about. So this has been absolutely awesome. And Dan, Dario, thank you so much for what you guys are doing for the StarCraft community, because it wouldn't be nearly the same without you guys. And there's a lot of people who are making this work. It's just so cool to having been a little bit part of it early and then coming back and just seeing that. Let's get some of the numbers up, but all the things that made it magical back then are just are there, and if anything, have only just grown blossomed into the things which are even better. It's super, super awesome. So thank you guys, and thanks for having me.
Well,
thanks for being here
again. Yeah, no, this was great. Thanks for taking the time. I know you're very busy being the CEO of a company with 4,000 to 5,000 employees. That's crazy. But yeah, thank you everyone for watching, and the Pylon Show will be back next week. So we'll see you then.
Thank you.
Shout out to the Pylon Show, the greatest show on the internet.